There's a particular kind of panic that only a city can hold. It looks like Times Square at full volume, lights flashing, crowds moving, everyone going somewhere while you're standing still, calling a name that nobody else can hear. It feels like Herald Square, scanning faces that never slowed down, wondering how someone you love can disappear in the middle of millions. It sounds like Central Park at dawn, sirens in the distance, joggers passing by, and the terrifying question echoing in your chest, where are you? In a city this big, loss feels louder and despair hits deeper. And love will drive you to search every block and every train and every shadow until hope is all you got left. And it was the morning after Halloween last year, the kind of slow, quiet morning where for once everyone in my house, they slept past 7. No school, no rush, no alarms. And Judah, my youngest son, was the first to head upstairs where my daughter sleeps. He assumed she'd taken the dog out or was in the shower, and Lucy, my youngest daughter, followed a little later, assuming the same. It wasn't until I walked upstairs around 8 a.m. that the first flicker of panic actually hit. She wasn't there. I reached for my phone to call her. Maybe she had stepped out to take the garbage outside, but the worst thing possible happened. Her phone, it rang on the table right next to me. She had left her phone. And no 21-year-old leaves their phone. A few feet away, we then spotted her wallet. Again, my sweet daughter can't make it down the block without stopping at the bodega for a sweet snack. And so after an hour of searching the neighborhood, it became clear. Everything pointed to our daughter being lured out of the home. And what we would later learn was the first iteration of a trafficking situation. Now, I share this not because I'm some oversharer. I share our story and I share her story with permission for a few reasons. First, our daughter, like many others, has been formed by some traumatic experiences in her life. Trauma has unfortunately played a part in shaping her and her brain. And trauma, as trauma does, rewires how her brain often works. It pushes people like her and others into survival mode where it becomes incredibly hard to actually depend on other people. But I also share this because if the gospel is waking up to the love of God, if the gospel is good news, then trauma and the capacity that it has to shape a human life can feel like really bad news. Why? Well, because trauma makes it hard to trust love, hard to feel safe, hard to imagine hope. Trauma can hijack the brain and keep people hyper-vigilant and anxious or even numb. It keeps us from vulnerability, and vulnerability is the soil where love actually grows. Within a historic Christian tradition, surrender or depending on God, it is actually the cornerstone of experiencing God's presence and might and grace and mercy. And you know what makes surrender harder? You know what makes dependence harder? Trauma. But this isn't just our daughter's story. Trauma is everywhere. As much as it's a buzzword, it's everywhere. Veterans returning home from war with PTSD, families shaped by addiction, children and adults wounded by abuse and neglect, abandonment. So many of our Mosaic folks raised or from violent and unstable and war-torn places around the globe. Trauma doesn't just blind us to hope or love. It can blind us to God. Sin, whether something we do or something done to us, it has the power to distort reality. It keeps us independent. It keeps us guarded and self-protected. When the whole aim of this life with God is a vulnerable, dependent relationship with the one who made us and loves us. And this is exactly why Jesus came, the Good Shepherd. See, the heartbeat of the incarnation, God becoming human, it's God saying, I will not let you miss me. I will not let you be blinded to my love. I will come to you. I will heal you. I will open your eyes to a love deeper than you could imagine. I'm the Good Shepherd. So whether your wound or my wound is abuse or betrayal, whether it's rejection or abandonment, or just the quiet lie that you are what you do or what you have or what others think, or your best moment or your worst moment. I want you to hear this. The Good Shepherd, he's coming. For you, for me. And there's really good news for you, for me, and for my daughter in that. The first part of this good news is that the Good Shepherd actually calls me by name. He talks about this in John 10. Jesus says, the shepherd calls his sheep by name. I remember when Amanda, my wife, and I were brainstorming names for our first few children. We'd scan magazines and list the most popular baby names out at that moment. Well, I got a list for you today. Listen to the list of these popular names: Billy, Sean, Lloyd, Jeremy, Eugene. How about these most popular names? Sophie, Mary, June, Betty, Goldie. Anyone know what these names are? They're the most popular names farmers and shepherds gave their sheep this past year. I love Eugene. 8 years ago, I drank some of the thickest, hottest Turkish coffee imaginable with shepherds in Palestine. It was there that I learned that in the ancient Near East, shepherds named every single sheep. The sheep didn't follow because of force. They followed because they recognized their names. And 24 some years ago, the girl that I was dating at that time, she looked at me out of the blue one day and said, whoever I end up with, I just want you to know they need to keep God first. And I had no idea what that meant, but I knew I liked her. And so I ended up in her church the next week, hearing about the good news of the gospel of Jesus for the first time in a way that actually melted and moved my heart. And it sent me on this 6-month journey of staying up every single night, studying the scripture and a bunch of other religious texts, asking questions about God and purpose and identity, hoping answers to those questions would eventually lead me to finding a faith that I wanted. And one night, sitting on my bed, I remember hearing these words: Dan, what are you doing? You want faith, but you're waiting to have all of your questions answered before you can have it, when faith is believing without having all those questions answered. Such a profound moment. But of all that happened that night and what I heard, the most powerful thing was that I actually heard my name. The creator of the cosmos said, Dan. That's what the Good Shepherd does throughout the arc of Scripture. He calls people out by name. Looked at a little guy in a sycamore tree and said, Zacchaeus, come down and let me eat at your house. Mary, look, I'm alive. Lazarus, my friend, come out. Peter, don't be afraid. It's a good day when you finally call on God's name. But it's an even better one when you hear God call on yours. Jesus does not pursue with shame. He pursues with recognition, and intimate recognition. The second part of this good news is that the Good Shepherd leads. He doesn't drive. Jesus says the shepherd goes ahead of the sheep. Amanda, my wife, and I, we raised our first few kids using parenting tools built around delivering logical consequences to their choices with empathy. But when we started to foster children, many of them shaped by deep trauma, we realized that approach didn't always work. See, trauma-formed brains, they don't always respond to logical consequences or pressure that's coming to one's life. They can't learn until they actually feel safe. Now, you know this. New York is different. Because of the population density, we live among an ocean of traumatic experiences. Public mental illness because of the lack of private space, homelessness, violence, fear. My kids alone have seen people threatening to jump off buildings, helicopters crashing into the East River. They walk past those sleeping on the streets or experiencing overdose on a daily basis. But just because something becomes normal doesn't mean it isn't deeply formative. And this kind of trauma, this wouldn't have been foreign trauma to Jesus' first students, his disciples. They lived under occupation and threat and oppression daily from the Roman Empire. And so how does Jesus lead these people that are shaped by trauma? Not by force, but by presence. The Good Shepherd is dangerously safe. Dangerous because he will face wolves for the sake of the sheep. Dangerous because he dismantles unjust systems that have the potential to crush lives. Dangerous because he names lies that deliver death instead of life. But safe because he never forces. Safe because he doesn't drag. He draws. And this is a leadership that our moment is starving for right now. If we want the world to taste the grace of God, the love of Christ, we must sound more like Christ's love and presence and less like culture wars. But the third part of this good news is the Good Shepherd lays down his life. Jesus says over and over in the Gospel of John, I will lay my life down. I lay my life down for my sheep. 2 days into our daughter being missing, a television producer called us. He dropped everything and he cried behind the camera as we shared the story of our sweet daughter. And then he would leverage every relationship that he had. And within days, television stations across the country were showing her story. And then churches across New York, liberal churches, conservative churches, everything in between were mobilized. Friends took off work to look for her. Church members searched the streets. Even unhoused neighbors that I know looked for her throughout the shelter system. People exhausted themselves for a kid that wasn't theirs. And after 7 days, media pressure became too strong. And those that had her were forced to bring her back into the middle of the city. She was spotted by one of our friends, then released in that moment and came home moments later. But love costs something. Following the Good Shepherd means letting other people's hurt and trauma touch our own lives. It means vulnerability and risk. It means carrying people's hurts and their heaviness. From neighbors helping me field ransom calls, to our other children witnessing their parents who couldn't keep one of their siblings safe. I mean, there is cost. There's been cost. And Jesus shows us that cost by first absorbing the worst violence that humanity offered him. He did this on the cross to reveal the depth and height and width of God's love for us. And so, Mosaic, this week we follow the Good Shepherd into the city, into subway platforms and sidewalks, into shelters and sanctuaries, into boardrooms and classrooms and bodegas and back alleys. And we go, not to fix, but to be present. Not to force, but to listen. Not to conquer, but to love. And we go dangerously safe, willing to face wolves, willing to absorb pain, willing to call people by name in a world and city that treats them like numbers. We go believing that the love of God still awakens hearts, that grace still disarms fear, and that the Good Shepherd is still calling, and that sheep are still listening. So may you and I walk these streets the way that Jesus does, with tenderness and courage and a holy resolve, until the nations of New York know they are seen, they are named, and they are deeply loved by the Good Shepherd, Jesus.